welcome to episode 2 of Kickstarted Gaming. Today we're going to be taking a look at a game that I've been looking forward to for quite some time now, a platformer called Micromages for the one and only Nintendo Entertainment System. Yep, this is a brand new physical release for the NES in 2019. First, let's talk about the product. As I mentioned in the intro, Micromages is a newly developed platformer for the NES, and depending on your pledge, you could get either the ROM or one of 3 physical editions that also included the ROM as well as a Steam key. First, we'll go over the digital edition. For €8 or $9, you get 3 things: the ROM, a Steam key, and a digital instruction manual, and that's it. The first physical edition was called the Retro Pack for €40 or $44. It included the digital edition rewards, the ROM file, Steam key, and digital instruction booklet, as well as a boxed copy of the game that included, of course, the box, a NES cartridge, a printed instruction booklet that's longer than the PDF, and a dust sleeve for the game. Before moving on to the other 2 editions, I think this would be a good time to mention an interesting tidbit about Micromages. The devs actually imposed an artificial size limit on themselves for the game. According to them, most homebrew NES releases are 512 kilobytes, which was the ROM size of most later NES releases, but they wanted to limit themselves to 40 kilobytes, which was the ROM size of most original NES games like Super Mario Bros. Another fun-ish fact, Super Mario Bros. Was actually 31 kilobytes, but anyways, I digress. I think it's a pretty awesome feat considering even small games today usually take up at least 1,000 times more storage space. Morphcat Games actually put out a video on how they achieve this, and if you're interested in how retro games work at all, it's definitely worth the watch. I'll drop a link to it in the video description. Moving on from my tangent, let's look at the next physical edition. The next edition we're going to talk about is the Deluxe Pack, clocking in at €55 or $61. For our money, we get everything from the first 2 tiers: ROM, Steam key, instruction PDF, box, NES cart, physical instruction booklet, dust sleeve, and then we also get a soundtrack on CD and an A2 sized poster with the same artwork as the box. Worth noting, the soundtrack has bonus tracks that aren't included in the game. Now for the last edition, the limited pack, costing a cool €100 or $110. This edition was limited to 100 copies and mixes things up a bit from our previous editions. You still get all the digital content, the box, the sleeve, and the instruction booklet, as well as the soundtrack and poster, but this time you also get a black box sleeve, a numbered black cartridge instead of the standard gray, a signed and numbered certificate, and the name of your choice in the instruction booklet. And not just your instruction booklet, obviously, but all 4,000 of them. Worth noting, the retro and deluxe tiers had multiple versions, all priced the same with different shipping waves, with the first wave estimated to ship in April of 2019 and the third wave as late as June. So now that we've covered the editions that were up for grabs, what did I get? Well, I purchased the first wave deluxe edition for €55 or $61 plus €8 or $9 in shipping, making my total $70. I mentioned in a previous episode of Kickstarted Gaming that I was a sucker for physical releases, and this being a good looking game for the NES, my first ever gaming platform, I had to get a physical copy. The soundtrack is actually what motivated me to back the deluxe edition over the retro one though, as I really enjoy 8-bit music. The poster was just an added bonus. So now let's look at the timeline. September 5th, 2018, the Kickstarter was launched and was fully funded for €15,000 in just 7 hours. Also on September 5th, I became backer 458. October 5th, the project closed successfully with 4,109 backers, raising €151,000, which is over 1,000% funded. October 30th, I received my survey via Kickstarter. November 4th, pre-orders went live. As an aside, you can still get a physical copy of this game at the link in the description if you're interested. December 28th, a hidden game mode, Blood Bonds, was announced. This is an additional multiplayer mode where if any one player dies, they all die. April 17th, 2019, the Steam version was announced. This was a surprise to everybody in the Kickstarter. April 30th, I received my Steam key and ROM download links. May 1st, the estimated delivery window of April 2019 has officially been missed. They announced that shipping should happen in the first half of May. July 8th, well past the middle of May, shipping of the limited editions was complete and the first batch of retro and deluxe packs was to follow. August 1st, I received my deluxe edition. So they did miss their deadline by 4 months, but with Kickstarter projects, I honestly expect all projects to be late. Some companies that have a history of Kickstarter projects or ones with a lot of capital that can eat through the cost of production usually deliver on time, but smaller companies and people doing their first Kickstarters almost always miss the window. It's just an unfortunate reality of crowdfunding projects. In this case, their reasoning was that their time was being eaten up by customer support regarding ROM and Steam keys, as well as an issue with their shipper where they had to file individual paperwork for each and every package sent, which, with over 4,000 backers, I'm sure consumed a ton of time. So now that we've talked about the different editions and the timeline, let's look at what I actually got, and then after we'll take a look at the game itself. Alright, so obviously we have the Micromages box. It has pretty awesome artwork and logos all the way around. And then we have some screenshots with some text on the back. But what we really care about is what's inside. We've got our game. Some stickers. Our dust sleeve. Ooh, and a bunch of stuff. Alright, so let's set the box off to the side and look at what I just dumped on my table. We have another Micromages sticker. Here is the first one. It is looks to be about 25 sprites or so. Then we have the instruction booklet. Oh, neat. This is talking about the multiplayer stuff. That's pretty cool. Walking you through the menus and scores and stuff. Ooh, levels. Oh, nice, the bosses. That's some awesome artwork. We have a little card here that talks about it being a multi-region card and how to change the region for the CIC chip. I think it's really awesome that they did this personally. I don't have any issues playing it myself, but it's great that you can play it in multiple regions. Normal, generic dust sleeve, nothing crazy here. And then the cartridge. This just looks like an NES cartridge. It's super awesome. Aside from missing the Nintendo branding and stuff. Please focus. Oh, interesting. They have directions for changing the region on the back as well. That's pretty cool. But yeah, I'm super happy with this. I think it's an awesome physical release. And if I didn't know any better, aside from the 2019 on the back of the cartridge, you know, here, I don't think I would find this out of place at all in the 80s with my NES. So yeah, pretty awesome release so far. I'll be talking about it more in the rest of the video. Now that we've had a look at what I got, let's fire this Micromage up. I apologize for 1, not having a period appropriate display, and 2, for not having a 4:3 display at all. But yeah, the game. Holy crap. That's what I have to say about this game on original hardware. The NES was before my time, but if my mom had brought out this game after I was done playing Super Mario Bros., little me would have been blown away. So it's awesome, but let's break it down. First, let's start with the graphics. The game looks pretty good. If I had to give it a score, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. The animations are super smooth, and honestly, it's not something I could have ever imagined seeing on the NES when I was younger. I think the levels look awesome and do a great job of putting you in a kind of dungeony, culty type environment. If I had one complaint, it would be that the palette is a little washed out in my opinion, but I understand they were working with limited colors given the capabilities of the NES and the artificial size limit. Another side tangent, there's actually a really great video by the 8-Bit guy talking about how NES graphics in general worked, and the developers actually go into pretty good detail about it in their video talking about game size. But the TLDR is that Morphcat made heavy use of sprite optimization, like making the characters smaller, and they also created their own tile sets for the levels. If you're interested in it at all, it's actually really cool how they did it, and you can find links to both videos in the description. Getting back to the subject at hand, let's move on to audio. And as I mentioned before, I love 8-bit music, and man, do I love this 8-bit music. Morphcat did an amazing job on the soundtrack for this game, and again, there's just something so perfect about hearing it on original hardware, albeit through TV speakers that are 30 years newer. I'm hesitant to give anything a 10 out of 10, but I think the soundtrack might deserve it. Now let's touch on probably the most important aspect of the game, the gameplay. As I mentioned in the intro, this is primarily a platformer. It has vertical levels, and you traverse by jumping, wall running, climbing ropes, and being thrown into the air by various objects. In addition, to battle the boatload of baddies in the game, you can shoot. Well, it's not really shooting, it's more casting, but potato potato. And yeah, it's a blast, pun intended. The controls are super fluid and feel natural playing on an NES controller. It's challenging enough to keep me interested, and the level design is varied enough it doesn't feel super repetitive. The bosses are challenging, but fun to fight, and there's a vast variety of villains to vanquish, all seemingly with their own unique mechanics. I think this game still holds up today as a fun little platformer, and as I've already said, if I had this game when I was a kid, I'd have been mystified the first time I played it, and I probably would have had a much harsher opinion of other games from the time. I would give it a 7 out of 10 today, and probably a 9 out of 10 considering the period it's emulating. Another gameplay element I want to mention is that this game is multiplayer. That's right, it is a couch co-op multiplayer NES game, and each player plays a different mage, and they all work to progress through the level. It can be competitive if you want because there is scoring, so you can compare scores at the end. It reminds me a lot of something like New Super Mario Bros. On the Wii, where you're both on the screen doing your own thing, collecting power-ups and bashing baddies. It can be pretty fun depending on who you're playing with, and again, depending on who you're playing with, it can make the game pretty easy. One cool thing Morphcat did was they made it capable of being 4-player co-op. But if you think back to your NES, you remember it only has 2 controller ports. What gives? Well, apparently there are port expanders that allow you to connect more than 2 controllers. Who'd have thought? The last thing I want to touch on are just the little things in the game that I think give it a little bit of extra oomph. This is what I would normally call the X factor. The first thing would be all the animations. It's awesome that these are included in a NES game. Things like a little puff of dust when you jump and a little explosion when your spell contacts a box. It's just awesome. Next, as silly as it sounds, is dancing. There's a fun little animation that plays on the scoreboard between levels, and if you hold down on the D-pad while you're in-game, your character does the same dance. Then we have a couple mechanical touches. The first is falling. When you fall from any kind of height, you bounce when you land, and it doesn't add a ton to the game aside from getting you killed from time to time, but I think it adds to the sense of immersion, which isn't something I thought I'd be talking about with a NES game. The second mechanic is a pretty big one. It's the vertical scrolling. I think it's well paced to make you feel a sense of urgency if you're playing solo and want to explore both halves of the map. With most of my game reviews, I like to go through a little bit of a checklist, but this being a review inside another review, I'll just give it my normal rating, which is on a scale of hell no to play before you die, should you play this game? And this definitely gets a yes, which is just below play before you die. It's a super fun game, and it's pretty cheap on Steam, and the best part, at least for the Steam release, is that it's only 25 megabytes. So now that we've talked about the NES cartridge and the game itself, let's talk a bit about the ROM. Obviously, the ROM is going to be essentially what's on the cartridge, so there isn't much to say, but it's nice to see what the art looks like in their proper colors and resolution. The game still plays super fluid like it does on the NES. This is of course depending on your PC and emulator. I was using Nestopia for anyone curious. But yeah, it plays a lot like the NES version, it just looks and sounds better. Moving on to the Steam version, it's more of the same. The only real difference being that there are baked-in options for audio, video, and input. And honestly, having the input settings baked into the game to the point where I can configure an Xbox One controller while in-game is awesome, and I think there might be some other indie games that could, benefit from the same kind of configuration. We have covered a lot so far, but there's still a ways to go. Let's take a look at the extras. As a reminder, my pledge included the soundtrack on CD as well as a poster. We'll talk about the poster first, as it's easy to cover, since it's just that, the cover. I knew what I was getting, but it's still a little disappointing. I think it would have been awesome to have a custom poster, like maybe a scene with one of the bosses, or even just a high-res, stylized level design. In any event, that's not what I have. And then briefly, let's talk about its size. It's an A2 sized poster, which is about 23 by 16 inches, which is slightly smaller than what's considered a medium-sized poster, which clock in at 18 by 24 inches. I personally think they should have just bumped up the size to match the standard size of posters. Moving on from the poster though, let's talk about the actual reason I ordered the Deluxe Edition over the retro version, the soundtrack. The soundtrack comes in a cardboard fold-out case with a custom cover, a track listing on the back that not only gives the names of the tracks and their lengths, but also if a track is a bonus or if it was unused in the game. And we also have labeling on the spine that's actually backwards of the way it should be. It's slightly frustrating, but probably not something you'd notice unless it was next to a bunch of other CDs. Moving to the inside, we have a list of credits for the creators of the soundtrack, as well as the cover illustration, and of course we have the CD itself, a black disc with the stylized name of the game, as well as the Morphcat Games logo and the 4 mages. Popping the disc into our PC, we see 14 tracks with a total runtime of just over 21 minutes, with the longest track being 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and the shortest track, which is the fanfare, being 8 seconds. Curiously absent from the track list is whether a track is a bonus or unused track, information that already appears on the back of the case, but I would still appreciate it being here digitally. Ripping the CD into WAV files, we see that the tracks total 222 megabytes. As I mentioned previously, I love 8-bit music, and the soundtrack to this game is pretty fantastic. I like having the physical CD with custom artwork, and I'm glad they included some bonus tracks, because otherwise I could have just grabbed the sound files from the Steam install. Normally this is where my conclusion would go, but we actually have a few bonus goodies from Morphcat. We got 2 magnets, which I think are pretty sweet, and they've now got a home on the front of my fridge. We also get a couple stickers, one with the stylized name and the mages themselves, and one with what appears to be a collection of 25 sprites used in the game. Both awesome, and I'm sure one will end up on my notebook with all my other stickers. And last, but certainly not least, we get a large cloth drawstring backpack with the same sprites as the aforementioned sticker. I can say 100% that I wasn't expecting this, but it's an awesome addition, and it's probably something I'll use when I don't need my full bag on me. Alright, now that we've covered everything I can think of to possibly cover about this release, what do I think? Well, in short, I think it's awesome. Like, really awesome. For $70, I got a full physical NES release that I think is an excellent quality game, a soundtrack, which again is excellent quality, spine labeling aside, and an alright poster, as well as the ROM file, a Steam key, and some pretty sweet extras in the stickers, magnets, and bag, all of which they made no mention of including. So with all the extras, including the Steam key allowing me to play from the comfort of my desk with an Xbox controller, I definitely think I got my money's worth. To the point where if Morphcat comes out with another game, I'll almost certainly back it without hesitation. This release definitely gets a thumbs up from me, but I think without the bonuses that weren't announced at the time of backing, or at all for that matter, I think I might be on the fence simply because of the high cost after shipping. I hope you enjoyed this look at Micromages for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and if you did, maybe give it a like and hit subscribe. I'll have more Kickstarted gaming videos in the future as more games roll in. But maybe consider sticking around a bit because there's a bonus disassembly of this cartridge as well as a comparison to Excitebike, an original NES title from the period that this game is trying to emulate.